Hey, welcome back to Nocturne Library. I'm really glad you're here tonight. Settle in however you need to. Let the lights stay low. Loosen your shoulders a little. Find the cool side of the pillow or the warm hollow in the blankets, and let yourself have this small stretch of time with nowhere to be and no one to answer to. Tonight's story will carry you into the quiet shelter of a vintage sleeper train climbing through the mountains in a night storm. You'll be tucked into a narrow berth while the weather moves outside in darkness and snow. And around you, everything inside the carriage is softened. The quilt drawn up close, the radiator giving off its steady warmth, the windows dim with cold, the wheels below settling into a muffled, patient rhythm. It's a close, gentle kind of journey, one that stays near the body, near the breath, near the simple comfort of being enclosed and carried safely onward. And beyond your compartment, there's the calm assurance of the night crew. People who know every bend and grade of the line by heart. Even in the storm, nothing here feels hurried. The train knows the mountain. The mountain makes room. And you, for a little while, only have to rest. If you'd like to subscribe, it quietly helps Nocturne Library keep making these nighttime stories. Now, let's take one easy breath together. In slowly. And out. Let the bed hold you. Let the world grow smaller and softer. Welcome in. Chapter 1. The Upper Berth in Rain. Rain is already on the glass beside your pillow, drawing thin silver lines that slant and join and separate again as the carriage moves. The quilt lies over your legs, with its heaviest fold across your shins, and under that weight, you can feel the padded thump of the wheels coming up through mattress, blanket, and bone in a steady, muffled measure. You are in Car 7, Berth 12 Upper, close to the varnished ledge by the window, while the train takes the first part of the Oberkamm climb. Later, there will be the long spirals, and above Halden Spur, the covered snowsheds, where rain changes its voice on the roof. And somewhere in the body of the night, the old curve counting custom may begin, without your quite deciding to count. For now, there is only this narrow berth, the rain-striped pane, and the dark mountain grade, lifting you by degrees. You do not need to feel all at once. The berth is small enough that you know its edges without looking. One shoulder rests near the wall, upholstered in burgundy wool, gone smooth where many travelers have leaned before sleep. Near your hand, the brass switch for the reading light has the coolness of old metal that has outlasted many fingers and many nights. It is not bright enough in here for surfaces to show themselves fully, but your body reads them anyway. The slight give of the mattress under your hip, the firmer board behind the padding, the tucked blanket edge near your calves, the nearness of wood and fabric and glass. Beside your head, the ledge under the window carries the scent of varnish that comes out more clearly in damp weather. At the corners, where wood meets frame, condensation has gathered in tiny pearls. From time to time, one bead swells enough to tremble when the carriage sways, then steadies again, too small to fall. On the other side of the pane, the rain keeps its own order, finer in one moment, thicker in the next, then briefly swept into longer ribbons when the train rounds a bend and the weather strikes from a new angle. You do not need to see outside to know the climb has begun. The Oberkamm Line has its own way of rising. It does not hurry at the mountain or challenge it. It takes the patient grades that older routes were built to trust, and the train answers with a motion that is less like pushing and more like being drawn upward by a line already laid down long ago. Even lying still, you can tell when the track begins to curve more deliberately, when the weight of the carriage leans into the mountain and then returns, when the wheels settle into the slower, deeper pattern that belongs to ascent. The sound reaches you softened by everything between track and ear. First, the contact of the rails, then the underframe carrying it, then the berth itself, giving it one more layer of padding before it arrives beneath you as a rounded thump. A measured knocking far below any sharpness. It comes through the mattress most clearly under the length of your side, and through the heel of one foot where the blanket has loosened a little. The train does not jolt. It works. That is what the motion feels like. Practiced, repetitive work, done without display. A faint warmth touches the lower edge of the berth from the foot end. Not strong yet, but present. Somewhere below, under the lower bunk, the radiator is doing its ordinary night duty, sending up a mineral heat that reaches first towards socks and blanket hem. It has not spread fully through the berth, and that makes the warmer patch more noticeable for being local. A modest bloom near your feet, while the air by the window stays cooler. The contrast is useful. It gives shape to the little room your body occupies. Cool cheek near the glass, warmer ankles under the quilt. One hand tucked where the blanket has kept its own stored heat. The train gives a brief side motion, then steadies. Somewhere beyond the compartment door, the corridor lives at a distance you can feel, but not quite hear in detail. A floorboard carries a vibration from another part of the carriage. Something metallic answers once, and then not again. Farther off still, a door closes with a cushioned fit. Wood meeting frame without slam. None of it asks for your attention. It simply places you among other enclosed spaces, other sleepers, other bundles of coat and blanket, and shoes set neatly below bunks, all being carried in the same direction through the same weather. You lie high enough in the berth that the window is almost level with your face. If you turned your head, the glass would be very near. You can imagine the cold in it without touching it. The rainwater crossing the pane catches what little light remains in the carriage and turns it into moving threads. They shift their paths whenever the train changes angle. And because of that, the window never quite repeats itself. One line overtakes another. a narrow, clear patch forms for a second and is gone. A bead gathers at the lower edge and is pulled away. The wool at your shoulder has a dry, slightly rough warmth. Not scratchy, only honest about being wool. It keeps the memory of the day's stored heat better than the metal fittings do, and better than the glass. The berth has been used long enough that each material behaves exactly as expected. Brass cools first. Wood keeps a middle temperature. Fabric yields. The mattress receives your weight and gives it back in a slower way, so that every shift of the carriage arrives to you softened, delayed by a fraction, almost translated. Then comes the first long curve of the climb. You feel it before you name it. The carriage leans and keeps leaning, not abruptly, but with a sustained persuasion that gathers through the frame, through the berth supports, through the mattress under your ribs. The quilt presses a little more firmly along one side of your legs as your weight settles into the turn. For a few breaths, the whole berth seems to lower beneath you by an inch. That is not truly downward, but sideways. And the mattress gives one deeper, cushioned dip, as though acknowledging the mountain's shape and arranging you more securely within it. You do not need to brace. The curve is too broad for that, too familiar in its pace. It carries you into one side of the berth, and then holds you there long enough for the body to stop distinguishing between movement and rest. This is one of the things night travelers know on this line, though they seldom speak of it much. The early curves still feel like changes, but after a while, the changes become the pattern. The mountain does not pass as a series of events. It passes as repeated leaning and return, repeated rain and wheel beat, repeated warmth gathering where the blankets are thickest. The train remains in the curve long enough for the rain to alter on the window. What had been diagonal now runs in a flatter slant, then draws into finer lines as the outer wall of weather shifts around the carriage. The sound on the glass changes with it. Not louder, not softer, only differently placed. You hear more of it beside your ear for a little while, less from the roofline. Then the carriage begins its patient return, and the mattress rises under you by that same almost imperceptible degree. When the berth comes level again, your body has already adjusted. One knee has loosened farther into the mattress. Your shoulder finds a more exact place against the wool. The hand nearest the wall uncurls without instruction. It is the kind of settling that happens beneath thought. The sort that can only happen when there is nothing required of you except to remain where you are, while something larger and more practiced carries you onward. The route itself has been making this climb for years beyond counting. Timber bridges, cuttings, embankments. The long spirals bored and bent into the mountain's terms. None of that needs to be pictured clearly to be felt here. What reaches you is the result. The measured pace, the broad curves, the refusal of haste. Somewhere ahead are the snowsheds above Halden Spur, where the rain will drum on timber overhead instead of hissing over open roof and glass. Somewhere farther along the line, the carriage will continue its old conversation with grade and weather. But those are only different textures of the same passage. The important thing, from where you lie, is that the train knows the way in the dark. The brass switch near your hand stays untouched. Its shape is enough, a small certainty at the edge of the berth. If you brushed it with a fingertip, it would answer with that same coolness, and perhaps a slight looseness in its housing from age. But there is no need. The compartment has already settled into the dimness that suits the hour. The window gives back the faintest suggestion of light from within. And beyond that, only rain and dark, close to the pane and uninterested in being read as landscape. Another sequence of wheel thumps passes under you, regular as a hand pressing once and again on a thick cushion. The carriage wood answers with minute creaks that never become complaint. In the corridor, some distant movement travels a few paces and fades. The berth remains what it was when you first noticed it. Narrow, warm in parts, cool in parts, entirely sufficient. The quilt has grown heavier in the best way, not because it has changed, but because your legs have accepted its weight. The pressure along your shins is no longer something laid over you. It has become part of the arrangement of the berth, like the ledge by your pillow, like the wool at your shoulder, like the rounded rise and fall of the train under the climb. Rain keeps tracing the glass. Condensation brightens and dims at the corner of the frame. Beneath everything, the wheels continue their padded measure into the mountain dark, and the mattress carries each thump upward until it reaches you as a low, steady reassurance. Chapter 2. Warmth at the foot of the quilt. The reassurance from the wheels keeps rising through the mattress, but your attention has drifted lower now, toward the place where the berth narrows and the quilt gathers more firmly over your legs. Up near the pillow, the air still carries a trace of window coolness. At your shins and ankles, something has begun to change. Not heat exactly, not yet, but the first easing of a chill you had not fully noticed until it starts to leave. It comes by degrees, a little more present each minute, threading upward from below the lower berth where the radiator runs along the foot end. Old iron giving back the heat it has been collecting. You feel it first at the edge of the blanket nearest your socks. The wool over your legs had already grown familiar in the last stretch of climbing. Its weight accepted. Its folds settled into place. Now the lower hem of it changes character. It feels less like fabric laid across you, and more like something gently warmed through, as if the train has been patient enough to learn where cold tends to gather in a sleeping berth, and has arranged, over many years, to answer it from underneath. The carriage leans into another broad curve. The movement reaches you in the order you are coming to know. First, the long sideward persuasion, then the mattress dipping by a fraction under your hip and thigh. Then the padded measure of the wheels adjusting below. Still steady, still unhurried. The quilt shifts no more than a fingertip's breadth across your shins. That small drag of cloth is enough to be felt. It reminds you how contained this upper berth is, how every motion of the train translates itself into pressure, warmth, and weight before it reaches thought. Your feet are the first part of you to trust it. Inside your socks, your toes no longer hold themselves apart from the cold. They rest. The heat from the radiator is mineral and dry. Unlike the damp coolness that lives near the glass beside your pillow, it has the faint scent old iron gives in winter buildings and train cars. A smell almost too slight to separate from the varnish and wool unless you are lying still enough to notice. Here, stillness makes room for such things. The berth is narrow, but it contains more gradations than it first seemed to. Cooler near the window shelf, warmer toward the foot. The smoothness of the sheet beneath your calves, the denser nap of the quilt above, the upholstered wall at your shoulder, keeping its own stored warmth from the carriage. Rain continues at the window in thin, diagonal ribbons. You hear it less directly now than in the beginning. The sound has moved a little farther away, not because the storm has changed, but because your body is listening elsewhere. The lower half of the berth has become more interesting than the weather. The train has made that possible. It has reduced the world to a few dependable sensations and let them repeat until they deepen. Another curve carries you left, then back. The old line climbs this way for hours, patient grades and long spirals, never hurrying the mountain. You do not need to picture the route to feel what it is doing. The evidence is under the blanket. Each bend lays a little more of the carriage's intention into the mattress. Each straightening lets your legs settle again into the quilt's gathered weight. The climb is not effort where you are. It is rhythm transferred through springs, wool, wood, and iron until it reaches you as comfort. At the foot end, the radiator gives a faint internal tick, the kind metal makes when heat shifts through it and finds another balance. Then it returns to its low, even warmth. The sound is so slight that it could be mistaken for part of the wheelwork, except that it comes from nearer your feet and carries no beat. You notice it because everything else is already arranged into pattern. A small change stands out kindly in such a place. Your calves loosen against the mattress. The release is not dramatic. It is more like the unfastening of something that had been drawn a little too tight without reason. The backs of your knees sink a touch deeper. The quilt presses down and is met from below by warmth, so that your legs seem suspended between the two. The upper berth begins to feel less like a shelf you have climbed into, and more like a fitted compartment of rest, built to carry a person through bad weather without requiring anything from them but stillness. Below, somewhere in the lower part of the compartment, the enamel carafe gives a tiny settling sound in its wire holder. Glass touches metal with one restrained click. then a smaller answering one, neat and domestic, and unmistakably near. The holder receives it. The carriage has made room for it. The compartment answers the curve with this little proof that everything in it is secured and doing its part. For a moment, the sleeping car feels less like a place you occupy than a mechanism quietly taking hold around you. You can nearly place the cream enamel by memory alone, nested where it always is. Station water inside it still cold enough to keep a clean, metallic scent. You do not need to reach for it. It is enough to know it is there below, secure in its bracket, acknowledging the turn, and then falling still again. The sound passes, and the berth closes around you once more. The wool near your knees has warmed enough now that its texture changes under notice. At first, it was only weight. Then it was weight with a trace of roughness where the fold crossed your shin. Now it has become denser and more settled, as if the fibers have taken in some of the radiator's heat and are keeping it. Your legs stop distinguishing so sharply between blanket and warmth beneath. The two have begun to work together. A broad sway comes and goes. Your knees move a fraction under the quilt. Not enough to reposition, only enough to follow the carriage as it leans. The mattress receives the motion before you do. Springs and padding soften it, then pass it on reduced, until what reaches you is no more than a rolling suggestion. There is skill in that reduction. You feel the train crew in it, though no one enters. No voice sounds. No lamp appears under the door. Somewhere beyond the compartment, decisions are being made with practiced hands. Speed adjusted for wet rail. Brake pressure measured. The long climb taken in the manner it has been taken many nights before. Up here, the result is simply that the berth never jars. Your feet grow warmer. The heat has reached the blanket edge fully now and has begun to bloom upward along your lower legs. Not strongly. The radiator is old and knows better than to overdo it. It keeps to a steady offering, enough to draw the last coolness from the hollow around your ankles. If you pay close attention, you can feel where the warmth thins as it rises, strongest nearest the foot end, then gentler by the shins, fading before the knees. The gradient is so gradual that it soothes by being measurable. Rain glides on the glass beside your pillow. A bead forms at the corner of the frame and holds. The shelf beneath it, varnished and dark in the dimness, keeps its faint, woody smell under the damp, but your attention does not remain there long. It returns again to the lower berth's hidden machinery of comfort. Iron warming, water secured in enamel, the quilt settling more deeply each time the train rounds another bend. You become aware of your heels in a new way, not from pressure, but from the absence of it. They have sunk fully into the mattress. The muscles along your shins no longer brace. Even the small effort of keeping your feet at a certain angle has gone. The train is carrying that too. You need not manage the placement of your legs, any more than you need to manage the ascent. Another long curve. Another return. The carriage rocks with the patient confidence of the line, and the lower half of the berth answers with tiny adjustments. A seam drawing lightly across your sock, the quilt slipping a breath's width toward one side, the radiator's warmth collecting under the blanket edge, and then evening out again. These are not interruptions. They are the way the berth speaks the language of motion. Below, the carafe gives one last faint tremor against its holder, so small it is almost imagined. Then, nothing follows. No clink, no rattle, only the padded wheel thump and the rain's softened hiss. Your legs feel heavier now, though not from fatigue. Heavier in the way warmed limbs do, content to remain where they are. The quilt's pressure over your shins has become broad and featureless, no longer a set of folds and edges, but one continuous layer. The radiator's heat has spread just enough that your feet seem farther away. Not numb, only deeply settled, absorbed into the lower warmth of the berth. Your ankles loosen a little more. Your knees follow. The line of your legs from hip to heel grows quieter in your own awareness, as if sensation there has spread out and flattened into something broad and even. It is no longer necessary to notice each separate part. The lower half of you yields at last, fully and without reserve, into the warmed weight of quilt and mattress. Chapter 3. The seventh long sway. The climb has found its rhythm now. You feel it before you think about it. Not only the padded thump rising through mattress and quilt, not only the rain tracing slanted lines beside your pillow, but the broader movement underneath everything else. The carriage takes its weight onto one side, stays there for a measured stretch, and then comes back through center with such patience that your own muscles begin by answering it. Then, little by little, stop trying to answer it all. After the second or third of these long motions, some part of the mind is already tempted to sort them, to wonder whether this one belongs with the others. Up here in the upper berth, the sway reaches you as a long thought carried through wood and springs. Your shoulder rests near the berth wall. Your knees lie under the quilt, where the warmth has gathered most across your shins. The cooler air by the window touches the bridge of your nose, while lower down, the old radiator keeps sending up that mineral heat from below. Between those two temperatures, your body lies arranged like something packed for safe travel, with wool beneath, blanket above, and the train taking care of the distance. The Oberkamm climb is known for this. Even if you have not traveled it often, the route makes itself understood through repetition. It does not rush upward. It circles and gains height by patience, by long curves laid against the mountain, by grades that ask for steadiness more than speed. In the berth, you do not need the map of it. You feel the line in the way the carriage commits to each bend and keeps to it, as if following an old instruction cut into rail and timber long before tonight's rain began. Another long motion begins. This one starts almost imperceptibly, with the mattress pressing a little more firmly under one hip, the quilt drawing a fraction toward the berth edge, the water on the glass changing angle as though the window itself has tilted in your sight. Then the full breadth of the curve comes into it. Your ribs, your shoulder, the side of your thigh, all register the same steady persuasion. Not abrupt, not enough to disturb, only enough to say that the train has entered another long turning and intends to see it through. There is a custom on this line, old enough that no one needs to announce it. Frequent night travelers sometimes count the long sways. Not every twitch of track, not the small shiver of points or couplings, but the true Alpine bends, the broad side-to-side motions that take their time. The saying is that after the 7th long sway, you stop resisting the climb. The train does the resting for you after that. You do not have to count. Still, the mind notices sequence, the way a hand notices the shape of a familiar cup. This may be the 3rd or the 4th. Perhaps it began before you thought to mark it. It does not matter much. What matters is the change that comes with repetition. The first curve asks your body to adjust. The next shows that adjustment can be trusted. Another arrives and finds less work left to do. The carriage comes through center again, level for a little while. Rain hisses on the glass in its thin, continuous way. Somewhere below, wood gives a minute answer to the track. A creak too ordinary to call attention to itself. The berth frame has its own language as well. The faintest dry sound from a joint. Then stillness. You lie within all of it, not listening outward so much as letting the sounds pass through the same field as warmth and pressure. Then comes the next long sway. This one goes the other way. And because your body has already learned the measure of the first, it meets the second with less insistence. The side of your head remains on the pillow, while the sense of level shifts around it. Your ankles, loosened by heat under the quilt, no longer brace. Your stomach settles after the first moment. Even your hands, wherever they have come to rest, seem content to stay there and travel. The route above Halden Spur is full of these patient negotiations with the mountain. Spirals, covered sections, long approaches where the train seems to think before committing its weight. From up here, with the berth wall close and the compartment door shut, you know that not as scenery, but as behavior. The line reveals itself by motion. A place can be learned through the feet on a path. This one is learned through the mattress under your side, through the delayed return from each curve, through the way the wheels keep their cushioned beat while the carriage rises. You might call this the 5th, or the 4th. The custom is forgiving that way. It is less a rule than a permission to stop keeping yourself ready. The bunk safety strap hangs where it always hangs. An old canvas band with its nickel clasp catching no light now, only making itself known by weight. Most of the time, it is still. On straighter sections, it lies against the berth edge, with no opinion one way or the other. But on a sharper bend, when the carriage takes a little more angle than before, the clasp shifts. For a breath, it seems to hesitate there, held between hanging and answering. Then it taps once against the frame. Just once. A small, bright click in the dark wood and wool around you. The sound stays a moment longer than it's making, clear and exact, as if the Berth itself had spoken in a single syllable. Then the clasp settles back against the canvas and is quiet again. That one sound does not sharpen the night. It does the opposite. It tells you exactly how much movement there is, and no more. The strap has answered for the Berth, the way the radiator answers for warmth, and the rain answers for weather. Everything is reporting from its own place. The train is leaning. The clasp says so. The angle eases. The clasp falls silent. Nothing needs interpretation beyond that. You drift with the next return to center. Your back spreads more fully into the mattress. The quilt, heavy over the lower legs, seems to gain weight, not by pressing harder, but by becoming more familiar, as if the body has stopped trying to distinguish each fold. The burgundy wool beneath your sleeve has warmed where your arm rests against it. The brass switch near the reading light remains cool and untouched. Beside your pillow, a bead of condensation on the window ledge trembles with the rail joints and keeps its place. Another curve takes hold. This one is broad enough that time stretches inside it. You feel the carriage commit, and then there is no hurry in the middle of the turn. The wheels continue their padded rhythm. Rain continues its slanting travel over the pane. Yet, the whole Berth is angled just enough that your sense of uprightness loosens another notch. You are not trying to stay level. The train has given that up for the moment, and you give it up too. Perhaps this is the sixth. You can see why people began counting. Not from restlessness, but from noticing how the body bargains at first. A shoulder tightens, a knee presses. The jaw remembers itself. Then the same motion comes again and proves it is not a surprise after all. By the time the count has gone on long enough, there is less bargaining left. The curve arrives already known. The body, persuaded by evidence, stops offering corrections. The carriage straightens. For a few breaths, the Berth feels almost still, though the wheels continue under everything with their upholstered thud. And the rain keeps drawing silver tracks beside your face. Beyond the compartment door, there is the faintest suggestion of the corridor. Not a distinct event. Only the far muffling of a carriage in use somewhere outside your small wooden alcove. It remains distant. Here, the main fact is motion, and how steadily it repeats. Then the next sway begins, and this one feels different. Not because the train has changed, but because you have. It takes you to one side with the same measured confidence as the others. The mattress bears you. The Berth wall receives the line of your shoulder. The quilt shifts a breath across your shins. Heat remains pooled near your feet. And somewhere in the middle of the turn, before the carriage has even fully come back, you notice that you have not prepared for it. No inward bracing. No small correction through the hips or neck. The movement has come and found room already made. The seventh, perhaps. Or close enough that the old saying would allow it. After that, frequent travelers say, the train does the resting for you. Lying here, you understand what they mean. Not that you disappear into sleep at once, and not that the climb becomes unreal. The sway is still present. In some ways, it is more present than before, because you are no longer meeting it with effort. You feel the whole length of the curve now. The beginning in the frame, the middle in the mattress, the return through the quilt and pillow, and the line of your own bones. But it passes through a body less interested in objecting. Another long bend follows after a while, and this time you do not even wonder where it falls in the count. Number has served its purpose. The custom has brought you to the threshold, and then dropped away. The carriage leans. You go with it. The carriage rights itself. You come back with it. Rain on the pane, warmth at the feet, wool under your arm, the occasional minute rattle from the berth frame. Each thing stays in its own lane, repeating with enough sameness to be trusted. The Oberkamm grade continues upward in the dark, turning where it must turn, taking height by these broad, unhurried arcs. You do not need to help. The train has found the mountain before. It knows how much speed to keep, how long to hold a curve, how gently to let the carriage settle after it. That knowledge reaches you not as information, but as comfort in the joints, in the unclenched weight of your legs, in the way your breathing has begun to match the time it takes for the sideward drift and the easy return. The strap hangs still now. The window carries its rain. Below, the radiator keeps its low warmth gathered near the blanket edge. And when the next sway comes, it feels less like a change than like the continuation of something already underway. Your body does not gather itself against it. It does not look ahead for the moment of correction. The long sideward cradle arrives, and you are already inside it, given over without carelessness, held without effort. Then, the patient lift that follows brings you back. And even that return asks nothing. For the first time tonight, not bracing is not something you are trying to do. It is simply what remains, as the train carries you farther into the mountain without asking anything from your tired muscles at all. Chapter 4. Timber overhead at Halden Spur. And when the next sway comes, it feels less like a change than like the continuation of something already underway. A long sideward cradle and the patient lift that follows, carrying you farther into the mountain without asking anything from your tired muscles at all. The berth answers that movement in its own familiar way. The mattress gives under your hip and shoulder by the same measured amount as before. The burgundy wool at your side staying faintly rough where your sleeve brushes it. The quilt still heaviest across your shins. Beside your pillow, the window keeps its thin diagonal rain lines, each one silver for a moment, when it catches what little carriage light remains, then gray again. A cooler seam of air rests near the glass. Lower down toward your feet, the radiator's dry warmth continues to rise through blanket and socks, not strong enough to notice all at once. Only enough that your ankles no longer remember being cold. The train climbs in the practiced way old mountain trains do, not hurrying, not hesitating. You feel the grade more in the wheel rhythm than in any thought of height. The padded thump under mattress and frame, the broad lean into a curve, the return through center, the brief, truer level before the next long bend begins. On this line, the route is built out of patience. Spirals, timbered sections, steady inclines that let steel keep its grip in weather like this. You do not need to picture the mountain to know where you are in it. The carriage tells you enough through pressure, sound, and timing. Rain still hisses against the glass. It has done so for long enough now that your ear has begun to sort its textures without effort. The finer threads move quickly, almost dry in their sound. Heavier drops strike and spread, leaving thicker trails that gather at the lower edge of the pane. At the corner of the varnished ledge beside your pillow, a line of condensation has formed again. Tiny, rounded beads touching, but not yet joining. The wood there keeps a stored warmth under its polished surface. Warmer than the window frame, cooler than the quilt. Another curve takes the carriage, and this time the lean is followed by something else. Not abrupt, only different enough to be noticed. A faint change passes through the roofline before it reaches your ear properly, as though the air above the berth has narrowed. Then comes a brief timber creak overhead, traveling from one end of the carriage to the other in a low, dry run of sound, not from inside your compartment, not from any loose fitting near your bunk, but from above, where old beams receive the weather first. A moment later, the rain changes. The hiss at the window remains, but it is no longer the whole of it. Overhead, close above the carriage roof, the storm gathers itself into a denser sound, drumming on timber, rain meeting boards and pitched roofing rather than open night. The difference is immediate and curiously settling. Outside has not gone away. It has simply moved one layer farther out, from glass to wood, from exposed weather to weather passing over cover. The train has entered the snowsheds above Halden Spur. You can hear the age of them in the sound. Not weakness, nothing uncertain in it, but the broad, resonant answer of old timber set for one purpose and kept to it for years beyond counting. Rain strikes above in countless quick impacts, close set and hollow-backed. Beneath that, the wheels continue their padded measure without any need to announce themselves. The result is more enclosed than before, as if your berth, already a narrow room of quilt and wool and warm ledge, has been carried into another room built around the whole train. The change makes the compartment feel smaller in the best possible way. The berth wall by your shoulder seems nearer, though it has not moved. The window beside your pillow no longer opens, in sound at least, to open rain and mountain dark. It opens to timber receiving rain on your behalf. The storm reaches you only after passing through planks, roof braces, carriage roof, window glass, varnished wood, blanket, and the patient structure of the bunk itself. You notice this not as a list, but as a sequence your body understands at once. How many surfaces stand between your resting face and the weather outside? The next stretch under cover deepens that impression. Rain on the shed roof comes in bands. For a few seconds, it is a close, even drumming. Then it thickens as runoff from somewhere higher on the slope finds a channel and pours harder over one section. The timber sends that extra water along above you in a brief, rushing passage. Then the sound evens again. Through it all, the carriage keeps the same climbing pace. No jolt, no uncertainty. Just the old line doing what it was built to do. And the train moving through the protected galleries, one after another. Your head lies turned slightly toward the window, close enough to see the rain trails changing shape on the pane. Under the snowshed roof, they do not vanish. They alter. The lines become finer, more intermittent, because less of the storm reaches the glass directly. Here and there, a bead forms from condensation inside and trembles with the train's motion. A larger drop outside catches from some gap or side draft and runs diagonally across the others, cutting a brighter path before thinning out. The ledge beneath remains dry, except at the corners, where the moisture gathers in small, clear pearls. The broad, side-to-side motion continues, though the covered stretch changes how it feels. In open rain, the sway and the hiss seem to belong to one another, curve and weather moving together. Under timber, the rocking becomes easier to separate from the storm. You can feel the carriage lean left, while the drumming overhead stays even. Then the train comes back through center, and the roof sound continues, almost unchanged. It lets the movement stand out more clearly through mattress and frame. The berth lifts under one side of your ribs, then the other. The quilt shifts by a fraction across your knees and settles again. Somewhere near your shoulder, the canvas safety strap gives the slightest dry rub against its fastening as the carriage rounds another bend. Though the nickel clasp does not tap this time. It hangs still after that, and the stillness is easy to imagine, even without looking. Old canvas at rest, metal cooled by the night air in the compartment. All of it familiar with these curves. You might have counted the long sways earlier. You do not need to now. The train has already taken over that part. The snow sheds on this route were built for heavier weather than tonight's rain. You can feel that in the unhurried way the train passes into them. Nothing in the carriage suggests special caution beyond the ordinary mountain care already present in every adjustment of speed. The line has done this too many times to make a display of it. Covered section, open section, curve, grade, another covered section farther on. Each one part of the same upward passage. Even lying still, You sense the root by its textures. Open hiss, timber drum. Open hiss again. The mountain translated into sound close to your ear. For a minute or two, the roof drumming becomes the main thing. It fills the space above your bunk, while leaving room beneath for smaller details to remain. The radiator continues its dry exhale near the foot of the berth. The wood shelf by your pillow gives back a faint, stored warmth where the side of your hand rests near it. The mattress receives each wheel thump and spreads it into something broader before it reaches you. You begin to notice how little of the storm arrives unsoftened. Even the loudest part of it, on the snowshed roof, is rounded by timber before it comes down through the carriage ceiling. Then, as gradually as the train entered, the covered sound starts to thin. At first, it is only a slight opening in the drumming overhead, a lessening at one side, as though the roof has lifted away by inches. Another low timber note passes along above, not quite a creak this time, more the sound of weight shifting from one set of beams to the next. The rain on the window grows clearer. You hear individual strikes on the glass again, among the finer hiss. The carriage keeps its same measured sway. The line beneath you has not changed. Only the layer around it has. And then the train is back in open rain. The difference is plain, but not sharp. The overhead resonance falls away, and the storm returns to the pane beside your pillow, to the carriage sides, to the long outer surfaces of the train moving through wet night. After the closeness of timber above, the open sound feels wider, though you are still in the same berth, under the same quilt, with the same warm pressure gathered over your lower legs. The window seems a little more active now, rain lines crossing and joining in quicker patterns. One bead at the ledge corner swells, touches another, and together they slide out of sight below the frame. You remain tucked into your narrow place as the train continues uphill. The snowshed has not interrupted the climb. It has only changed its acoustics for a while, giving the storm another voice. You can imagine more covered stretches ahead above Halden Spur, each one arriving in the same understated way. A timber note overhead, the rain drawing closer above than beside. The carriage becoming a room inside a room for a minute or two before opening again. The thought does not sharpen your attention. It smooths it. The route has these variations already built into it. You do not have to prepare for them. Another long curve begins. You feel it first in the mattress under your shoulder blade, then along your hips, then in the quilt's slight tug across your shins as gravity shifts by a degree and returns. Rain slides in silver threads down the glass. The ledge by your pillow remains faintly warm. The air nearest the window touches the bridge of your nose with a cooler trace, while the lower berth's radiator keeps working at your feet below all thought. Farther out, beyond wood, glass, and carriage wall, the storm goes on over the mountain. Here in Car 7, in the upper berth, what reaches you is filtered and measured. Wheel rhythm, wool, varnish, mineral heat, rain made first into hiss, and then, when the line passes under timber, into drumming above your head. The train enters another bend. The bunk frame gives its small, answering rattle and settles. The window gathers fresh lines of water. Somewhere ahead on the route, there will be more boards overhead, more brief roof sound, more return to open rain, all in the same patient order. For now, the carriage leans and comes back, leans and comes back, climbing through weather that changes shape around you, while your own small space stays much the same. Pillow near the glass, quilt heavy over the legs, warmth near the feet, and the mountain night kept at a distance by timber when needed, by glass when not. Chapter 5. Amber under the door. For now, the carriage leans and comes back, leans and comes back, climbing through weather that changes shape around you, while your own small space stays much the same. Pillow near the glass, quilt heavy over the legs, warmth near the feet, and the mountain night kept at a distance by timber when needed, by glass when not. After a while, you notice that the carriage has another layer to it besides rain and wheels and wood. Not a new sound exactly, only one that has been there all along, farther off than the radiator and less steady than the track. It comes from beyond the compartment door, through the narrow measure of corridor that belongs to the rest of the sleeping car. A latch somewhere down the passage gives a padded click. Then nothing for a stretch, long enough that you stop listening for more. The berth remains close around you, burgundy wool at your shoulder, the wall by your back, firm through the blanket. The brass switch above, gone cool with age, untouched. Rain still marks the window beside your pillow in diagonal threads that catch what little light there is and lose it again. The train keeps to its patient grade, and each broad curve moves under you before your thoughts have fully named it. Then, from beyond the door, a step pattern, not hurried, not tentative either. The sound comes through floor and frame more than through the air. A measured tread along the corridor runner, one foot, then the next, with a slight checked rhythm that belongs to a practiced pass in a moving carriage. By now you know it without seeing it. Myrick making his pass. You do not picture him in any detailed way. The reassurance is smaller than that, more practical. A carriage this old has its own language of use. Hinges, catches, boards, glazed panels, berth frames, the long joined body of the train answering the mountain one curve at a time, and among those sounds, this one belongs. A person moving through car 7, because that is what is done at this hour, in this weather, on this line. Checks made, doors glanced at, nothing disturbed. The steps draw nearer, then soften as the train enters a curve, and the corridor floor takes some of the weight differently. You feel the lean first in your ribs and knees beneath the quilt, then in the bunk strap, where the nickel clasp shifts against canvas, but does not tap this time. The berth tips in its broad, familiar arc. And somewhere farther down, near the vestibule, the old mountain mail hook by the vestibule gives its tiny, sympathetic tick. It is such a small sound that you almost fold it into the others. Iron answering iron. A remnant from the line's postal years, still fixed where it was fixed, though no sacks are caught there now. You have not seen it tonight. Only know where it is by memory, and by the way old fittings make themselves known in motion. On straighter track, it keeps to itself. On a lean like this, it remembers. The steps continue. You could count them if you wanted, but counting is not needed. The old custom on this route has already done its work. Somewhere back among the long sways, your body gave up trying to meet each curve ahead of time. The train does that part, so you listen without effort as the tread comes level with your compartment. For a brief moment, amber appears under the door. Not bright enough to reach the berth in any useful way. Only a thin seam at the threshold, warm in color against the dark floor. It slides into place, holds there for a breath or two, and you know that Mirek has paused outside, lantern low, making the same ordinary check he has made on other wet nights. On other climbs through the Oberkamm dark, the compartment remains closed. No handle turns, no voice. Just that line of muted gold beneath the door, enough to mark a human presence and the continuation of routine. The train gives a cushioned downward thump through the mattress as the wheels find a rail joint. The amber line trembles once with the motion. Rain keeps hissing at the window. Heat from below stays gathered around your feet and the blanket edge nearest them, dry and mineral, as if the iron ribs under the lower berth have been storing the shape of warmth for years. Then the seam of light moves on. It narrows, slips away, and leaves the threshold dark again. The steps continue a little farther down the corridor, losing definition with distance, until they become part of the carriage's general night sound. No more separate than the muted working of springs, or the faint passage of air through old seals around the door. You settle more fully into the place where you already are. The pillow has taken a slight hollow under your head. The varnished ledge by the window is cool near the glass, warmer toward the berth wall. And at one corner, a trace of condensation has gathered again. Too little to fall. The quilt lies with its known weight across your shins, heavier there than over the knees. And every time the train enters another curve, that weight shifts by scarcely more than a hand's breadth before returning. These repetitions become easier to receive once the corridor has offered its small proof that the night is being tended. Farther off, another latch closes. It might be a compartment door, eased snug, or a cabinet catch, checked and left alone. In a sleeper car, you do not need to know which. The exact source matters less than the manner of it. No abruptness, no fumbling. Only the muffled competence of things being put right as they go. You find yourself listening into the spaces between those sounds, too. not because they are empty, but because they are filled with the train's own interior life. The corridor runner dulls footfalls. The partition walls pass on a softened version of every movement. Glass takes the rain and turns it from weather into texture. Wood receives small knocks and rounds their edges. Even the compartment door, thin as it is, changes the world beyond it into something manageable, reduced to seam light, distant catches, a tread moving steadily onward. Another long sway begins. You know it not from any one sound, but from the way your shoulder settles a fraction more firmly into the berth wall, and the quilt presses differently over one knee. The window rain slants at a slightly altered angle. The safety strap hangs with a new line to it, canvas drawing tauter for a moment before easing back. Somewhere under all of it is the patient climb itself, the train still working upward through spiral and grade, never in a hurry. The old line was built for this kind of progress. You feel that more than think it. The mountain is not being challenged. The car simply follows the route given to it, curve after curve, timber where timber is needed, open stretch where rock and weather allow it. The people who move through these corridors at night know the route in the same practical way your feet know the warmest part under the quilt. They do not need to announce their knowledge. It shows in the even pace, in the brief lantern pause, in how the car keeps its balance through rain. Once the steps have faded almost entirely, their absence leaves behind a greater sense of enclosure than before. Not because the world has narrowed, but because it has briefly widened and then folded back in. For a minute or two, you have been aware of the whole sleeping car, the corridor, the vestibule, the old hook, the latches, the runner under measured shoes, the lantern passing berth after berth. Now, all of that recedes again, and your own compartment becomes distinct by contrast. A smaller chamber inside the larger moving body of the train. The radiator gives off its steady, low heat. You can feel where it reaches best. Along the soles, the ankles, the underside of the blanket near your feet. Higher up, by your hands and face, the air remains cooler, touched by the window. The difference is familiar now. You no longer sort it into warm and cold, so much as into near and far, foot and pillow, iron and rain. Below, the enamel carafe rests in its holder without a sound. You can almost summon its clean, faint metal scent from memory. Station water sealed in cream enamel and wire. But it stays where it is, and you stay where you are. And that, too, is part of the comfort. Nothing needs adjusting. The berth has already arranged itself into a workable balance of pressure, temperature, and motion. Another seam of amber appears, much fainter this time. Farther down the passage, where the corridor bends, or another compartment threshold catches the lantern's edge. Then it is gone before you can decide whether you truly saw it or only sensed its reflection through the lower gap. The effect is the same. Mirek is still somewhere along the car, still making his round, longer near enough to matter. Rain resumes its place as the clearest sound after the wheels. Not the roof drumming of the snowsheds now, but the open, sifted hiss against glass, with occasional thicker threads of water joining and sliding down the pane beside your pillow. The train's motion keeps time beneath it. Thump through the mattress, sway through the frame, return through center. A faint rattle in the bunk hardware, then stillness again. You lie inside all of that, as if inside a mechanism built for one purpose only: to carry sleeping bodies uphill without requiring anything from them. Corridor checks, old fittings, door latches, lantern light under thresholds. These belong to the mechanism too. Not interruptions, not reminders of a world beyond your berth. More like the hidden workings that let the refuge remain a refuge. The next curve is a longer one. You feel it begin at the hips and travel upward through the spine to the back of your neck against the pillow. The mail hook answers once more from far down the carriage, a bare little tick and no more. Then the lean steadies, holds, and returns. By the time the train comes level again, the corridor has gone fully quiet. No step pattern now, no latch, only rain, wheels, warmth at the feet, and the close dark of the compartment. The door remains shut. The threshold stays black. Yet the memory of that amber seam lingers for a little while in the mind's eye, not as brightness, only as evidence. The pass completed, the car observed, the climb continuing exactly as it should. So your attention draws inward again, though not as tightly as before. The berth feels both smaller and more connected. Your pillow by the rain-striped glass, your legs under the quilt, your feet above the radiator's stored heat, and beyond the door, a corridor already settling after its brief human movement. The whole car seems to have exhaled into its next stretch of night travel, and the train goes on climbing, with the same measured rise beneath you, the same broad sways that no longer ask to be counted, the same rain feathering and gathering on the pane beside your head, while the compartment keeps its shape around you. Chapter 6. Water, Metal, and Varnished Wood. One bead of condensation gathers at the corner of the ledge beside your head. Another, fed by a thread too fine to notice until it arrives, inches down from above. The train alters the angle by a degree here, a degree there. The two beads meet and become a larger drop, clearer and heavier than either was alone. For a few breaths, it clings there, rounded and full, holding only a blurred stripe of window light and darkness. Then, with the next long sway, it slips over the edge and vanishes from sight. And the train goes on climbing, with the same measured rise beneath you, the same broad sways that no longer ask to be counted, the same rain feathering and gathering on the pane, while the compartment keeps its shape around you. After a while, your attention settles on what is nearest. Not the mountain outside, which reaches you only as weather and incline. But the things within arm's length: wood under varnish, brass, enamel, wool, glass. By the pillow, the air is cooler where the window gives off its faint, damp chill. Lower down, near your feet, the radiator still breathes up through blanket and socks with that dry mineral heat that feels almost granular against the skin, as if warmth can have a texture. You lie between those temperatures and feel how the berth arranges them. Cool at the temple, warm at the shins. The quilt heavier where it crosses the lower legs, lighter over the knees where the filling has shifted and been smoothed flat again. The mattress receives the padded thump of the wheels and gives it back softened. Each join in the track translated through stuffing and frame into something rounded and regular. Rain, iron, timber, distance. Here they arrive, reduced to manageable sensations. Below, in its wire holder, the water carafe rests. You cannot see it from here without lifting your head, but you know its shape from touch and from earlier glances. Cream enamel, dark rim, the metal cap fitted close. When the carriage leans through a curve and the air shifts, its scent rises faintly from below. Station-filled water, cold metal, the clean smell of a tap run a moment before filling, of a vessel rinsed and set back in place. It is almost nothing. And because it is almost nothing, it reaches you intimately, in rain and wool and warmed iron. That cool cleanness stands apart. You imagine the enamel itself cool to the hand. The cap would hold a little of the compartment's chill, where the metal has not yielded. If you reached down now, your fingers would close around that smooth weight and feel at once how much colder it is than the blanket, than your own wrist, than the wood near your pillow. The thought of it freshens the mouth. You do not reach. Near your head, the varnished shelf beside the window has its own faint warmth where the compartment air has reached it, though the corner nearest the glass stays cooler. If your fingers drifted there, they would find the finish smooth, but no longer glossy slick. At the edge, where the ledge meets the frame, moisture gathers again. Not enough to spill, only enough to pearl and thicken where the sway persuades it together. Rain continues to draw slanting silver threads across the pane. Some lines hurry downward, joining others and thickening before they part again. Some remain thin and nearly still, trembling more than moving. Through the glass, the storm is reduced to pattern and sound. You do not need to know how the track bends beyond the compartment, or which wall of rock or stand of fir the carriage is passing. The weather is here beside your cheek, in these diagonal ribbons, and in the coolness they cast through the pane. Above your shoulder, the brass reading light switch is still cool when the back of your knuckle brushes near it. The metal has that definite chill brass keeps, even in a warmed compartment. Not icy, only unmistakable. It makes the wood around it feel warmer by contrast. You have no need to turn the lamp on. its use belongs to another part of the night. Earlier, perhaps, when tickets were folded away and shoes set neatly below, and the berth was still becoming yours for these hours. Now the switch is simply a fixed point in the dark, waiting exactly where your hand expects it. The carriage leans through a curve, and the berth answers with its familiar sideward persuasion. Nothing abrupt, just the long inclination that moves through mattress, frame, quilt, and shoulder all at once. Somewhere below, the carafe settles in its holder with a small contact of enamel against wire, then is still again. The sound is so slight that it almost disappears into the wheel rhythm. But once heard, it seems to complete the compartment. It is the lower berth, the floor, the fittings beneath your sight line, giving a brief sign of themselves. More than that, it gives the water a presence, contained, waiting, not to be disturbed unless wanted badly enough. You do not follow the noise with any effort. It is enough to let it arrive and pass. Earlier, each detail introduced itself separately. The strap clasp, the corridor light under the door, the change in rain when the train entered timber above Halden Spur. Now the details remain distinct, but they no longer present themselves as news. They have drawn closer than that. The brass chill, the varnish scent, the enamel weight below, the cleanliness of stored water. Each has become part of the narrow life immediately around your body. The wood by your pillow smells faintly of varnish when the air shifts. Not anything sharp, but that dry, resin-dark scent finished wood keeps in warmth and damp weather. It mingles with wool and rain and the radiator's iron breath. If you breathe in slowly, you can sort them for a moment. Wet glass first, then the cleaner thread from the water below, then the denser smell of upholstery and warmed blanket. After that, they blend again, becoming simply the smell of the berth itself. The train continues upward with the same patient pressure. You feel it not as effort, but as steadiness under everything else. The Oberkamm climb has become less a route than a behavior of the carriage. This measured rocking, these softened impacts, the way rain on glass stays constant, while the floor beneath all of it very gradually rises through the mountain. Somewhere beyond the compartment, beyond the corridor and vestibule and couplings, the locomotive is doing the difficult part. Here in the upper berth, what reaches you is only the result. Well-timed slack taken up, speed adjusted before you would think to notice. No jolt large enough to disturb the arrangement of quilt and pillow. You imagine, without needing to see it, the carafe nested below in its cradle through another bend. If you were to reach down later and pour, the cap would turn with that restrained metal resistance clean threads have when they are well kept. The water would strike the cup or glass with a contained note, and the scent would rise cooler than the compartment air, carrying with it platform stone, rinsed enamel, the brief metallic brightness of water just drawn. The The thought is so specific that for a moment it is nearly a taste. Still, you leave it where it is. The not reaching becomes its own kind of comfort. Rain continues to stripe the pane beside your head. The lines cross and separate. The window shelf dries in one place and pearls again in another. The wood answers each shift of humidity with a smell too faint to call attention to itself, unless you are already lying still enough to notice. And you are. From farther off, through walls and door and corridor carpeting, comes only the most reduced life of the train. Perhaps a muted fitting taking weight. Perhaps a distant door eased carefully to its frame. No voices. The checks have been made. The lantern pass came and went. What remains is this close company. Glass cooling, brass resting, enamel keeping water, wood receiving damp and warmth and giving back its resin scent. The berth sways again, long and even. Your shoulder settles more fully into the mattress. The quilt shifts by hardly more than a breath across your knees. Heat remains gathered near the feet. Near the pillow, the pane gives off its slight chill. Between them, you lie in the narrow space shaped for sleep, attended not by any one dramatic comfort, but by many small, exact ones fitted together. And as the climb goes on, the carafe below seems to gather itself with the motion, answering each curve by the faintest live weight against its wire cradle, as if the dark compartment were breathing around that cool, untouched water. Chapter 7. Letting the train do the resting. And as the climb goes on, those materials stay near you in the dark. Varnished wood at your temple, cool brass above, enamel and water below. Rain tracing the glass in thin diagonal ribbons beside your head. After a while, you no longer follow each part of it. The rain remains. The wheels remain. But your attention no longer goes to every sound as if it must answer for itself. What had come separately a little earlier, the beginning of a lean, the quiet return, a small tremor in the frame, warmth low down, coolness by the window, comes together now more often than not. It overlaps, repeats, continues without asking to be watched. You lie in the upper berth as before, one shoulder a little toward the wall, your head near the rain-striped glass. The quilt gathered over your legs, with its familiar weight across the shins. The carriage moves into another long curve. Not enough to disturb the pillow, only enough to draw you a little deeper to one side, and then let you ease back. Somewhere in the climb, the old counting has already fallen away. The sways have gone on without you. The train has taken up that part. You feel it most in what is no longer being done. Your ankles are not braced now. Your knees do not hold themselves apart from the motion. Even the small watchfulness at the back of your neck has thinned. The berth seems smaller than it did at first, but usefully so. Less a compartment to keep track of than a place already fitted to you, close enough that your shoulder finds the wool. Your temple knows the ledge is there. Your feet stay within the pocket of warmth rising from below. At the foot end, the radiator has been working so quietly for so long that you know it mostly by what has gathered from it. Dry heat under the blanket edge nearest your socks. A low mineral warmth with that old iron character sleeping cars keep. Then, after a curve that leans the carriage a touch farther than the last few, there is one faint hiss from below. Not sharp, barely more than a breath passing through metal. And after that, the warmth seems to settle lower, steadier, spreading in a calmer band beneath the quilt, across your feet and lower calves. You notice it and do nothing. The quilt already lies where it should. The pillow has already shaped itself around the side of your head. The berth wall holds one warmer patch above the shoulder and a cooler one near the window frame, and both are right where they belong. Rain slips down the glass beside you in silvered threads, catching what little light lingers from the corridor side of the night, then thinning, joining, disappearing below the ledge. You do not follow them far. Another curve comes on, broad and patient. The carriage leans, holds, returns. By now, there is no need to make anything of it. The custom belongs to the line and to the people who mention it softly, as they mention the old mountain structures and the turns in the dark. It has already done what it does. The counting part is gone. What remains is the sway itself, and the way your body no longer meets it with questions. The canvas safety strap hangs where it has hung all night, a dark band at the berth edge, more felt in your sense of enclosure than seen. Its nickel clasp has cooled with the night air and the age of the carriage, and most of the time it says nothing. On one firmer bend, when the wheels take a joint and the carriage settles a little more distinctly to the side, the clasp taps the frame once. A small metal note. Then stillness again. The larger motion goes on around it, unbroken. Farther off, beyond the compartment door and the corridor beyond that, the sleeping car has settled too. Earlier, there had been the occasional latch, the measured tread of a pass, doors checked against weather by practiced hands. Now, even those signs have thinned. If someone moves out there, it comes through only as part of the car itself. A board taking weight and giving it back. A muffled contact. Then the train's own motion covering it over. No amber line appears beneath the door just now. None is needed. Rain on the window. Warmth at the feet. The mattress answering the rails. Sway and return. The order changes. The substance does not. Sometimes your attention narrows to the blanket edge across your ankles, where the radiator's steadier heat gathers and makes the wool feel a little heavier, a little more settled into the shape beneath it. Sometimes to the cooler air near your face by the window. Sometimes only to the berth itself, not in pieces now, but as one arrangement of wood, fabric, metal, and motion. All of it worn into cooperation by long use and repeating miles. You do not need to choose. Another bend, another measured lean. Your hip settles a fraction deeper into the mattress. The quilt shifts hardly at all over your shin. The pillow receives the side of your face with the same slight coolness near the window side, and the same warmer patch under your cheek. Burgundy wool brushes the back of your hand. Or perhaps it does not. The difference has become small. The train climbs through one of its long mountain turns, and for a while, the sway lasts long enough to feel almost continuous. Less a movement than a condition you are lying inside. In that held lean, there is no need to resist. The line is old. The grade knows itself. The upward work reaches you only as timing now, as duration, as the unhurried length of one curve and then another. Rain on open track sounds one way. If timber comes later, it will sound another. Nothing asks to be solved. At your feet, the radiator keeps its lower, even warmth. After some minutes, perhaps more, you become aware that your toes have uncurled inside your socks. Such a small thing. Complete all the same. Earlier in the night, the heat had to arrive and be noticed. Now it is simply there, and your feet have accepted it so fully that they no longer report on it, except by loosening further under the quilt. Below, the carafe in its holder keeps its place without a sound. Beside your head, a new bead of condensation forms at the corner of the ledge, fed by the cold of the glass and the damp beyond it. You do not watch it gather. Only later, the corner shines a little more than before. Then the carriage leans, and the shine is gone, whether into the varnished dark grain below or out of sight. The difference does not matter. The ledge remains smooth. The rain goes on. There is comfort in how little has to happen. The train gives you motion enough to rest inside, not enough to call you back. Even the sharper details have softened through repetition. The brass switch above is no longer much of an object, only one cool point in the berth's arrangement. The safety strap is less a strap than the fact of an edge held. The radiator is the place from which warmth comes, steady and low and sufficient. The line itself, with all its curves and climbing grades, has become something your body recognizes without naming. Another long sway, another return. The thought of what people say about this line comes and thins before it fully forms. Not words exactly, only the sense of being carried by something that has taken over the measuring and the waiting and the small anticipations. The car leans when it must. It steadies when it can. It keeps the warmth gathered at your feet. It carries the rain as sound against glass and roof, and whatever lies outside in the dark. Your part has narrowed to almost nothing, and even that begins to fade. The berth rocks once more through a curve so broad that beginning and end nearly disappear. The strap stays still. The radiator keeps its faint hiss hidden now inside a lower, even heat. Rain threads the window beside your pillow. then blurs into the dark beyond the glass. Under all of it, the wheels go on with their padded, dependable thump, and the motion goes on with them, and the climb, and the warmth at your feet, and the dark just beyond the rain-streaked pane, until the train's long, patient going is nearly all that remains. Chapter 8. Still climbing, still sheltered. The wheels go on under everything, their padded thump rising through mattress and frame in the same measured way, as if the train has settled into a depth of climbing where each length of rail resembles the last. Beside your face, the rain keeps changing itself on the glass. Silver threads joining, separating, beginning again. Only after a few breaths does the rest of it return. Car 7, berth 12 upper. Your body on its side near the window. The quilt gathered over your legs. The warmer air pooled nearer your feet. Nothing needs changing. The pillow has already taken the shape of your head. The berth wall keeps one mild patch of heat against your shoulder blade, where warmth from below travels into the wood. At some point, the difference between one curve and the next has thinned. You still feel the carriage lean, of course. The long sways of the line have not stopped, but they have become broad enough, familiar enough, that the body no longer marks each one as a separate event. A little pressure into the mattress on one side, a little release, then the return through center, hardly worth naming before the next patient lean begins. Earlier in the climb, you might have noticed where one ended and another started. Now the movement passes through you, more like breathing passes through sleep. Present, regular, and not requiring an answer. The rain on the glass keeps its own changing hand. In the open stretches, it runs in a fine hiss against the window beside your pillow. The water pulled into diagonal ribbons by speed and wind. Then, after some distance, you do not need to measure. The sound thickens overhead. Timber takes the weather from the roofline and gives it back, altered. The snowshed sections above Halden Spur arrive this way in the dark, not by sight, but by that denser drumming over the carriage. A roof sound close above another roof sound. Rain on wood before rain on glass. The berth grows smaller in the best way when that happens. Glass, wool, varnish, quilt, mountain. And somewhere above, boards holding the weather for a moment before letting it pass on. A faint change travels through the carriage as it enters one of those covered lengths. Not a jolt. More the old structure answering the change in acoustics and pressure. Something along the roof gives a brief wooden complaint and settles. Then the drumming steadies. You lie under it without needing to picture the boards overhead, though you can feel their presence in the altered sound, in the way the rain loses its open edge and becomes rounder, nearer, enclosed. The train keeps climbing through it with the same practiced pace as before, not hurrying the sheltered part, not delaying it either. When it comes back out, the timber falls away from above, almost without ceremony. The roof note lifts, The rain returns to the window as a finer hiss, and for a few breaths, you can hear the glass more clearly than the carriage. A bead of condensation at the corner of the ledge beside your pillow catches some passing vibration and shifts against the varnish. The wooden shelf smells faintly of old polish, warmed and cooled 1,000 times. Your temple is near enough to the wall to feel that the wood is neither cold nor warm exactly, only used, as if it has spent years learning how to stay steady while weather moves around it. Far down the corridor, a door eases shut with a padded click. It is such a small sound that the rain nearly takes it at once. Even so, it reaches you through the compartment door and the berth frame and the wool lining, not as interruption, but as part of the carriage continuing to be itself. Somewhere farther along, someone has finished with a latch. Someone has drawn a panel too. The train absorbs it. The sound flattens, almost fails to arrive, and is gone. Your breathing does not need to change for it. After a while comes the step pattern you have heard before in the night, muted by carpet and distance, recognizable less by volume than by timing. Myrick on his pass again, lantern in hand somewhere beyond the compartment wall. You do not see him at first. You hear one sequence of steps, then another after the carriage leans and rights itself. The corridor remains out there, narrow and dim beyond the door, its presence reduced to those softened steps and the carriage's old interior hush. But the door stays shut. You remain where you are, and his presence reaches you only in signs the sleeping car has taught you to trust. Then, the amber seam appears under the compartment door. It is brief, no wider than the thickness of the threshold allows, and warmer in color than anything else in the berth. For a moment, the floor edge below takes on that diluted lantern glow. The lower berth frame, unseen but familiar beneath you, seems to gather it and let it go. Then the light is already moving on, half lost to the dark before you can be sure of it. The steps continue a little farther, then fade into the same corridor hush from which they came. No knock, no pause, only the fact of a check being made. One more pass along the carriage, while rain works at the mountain outside. The berth settles after that into an even deeper sameness, as if being observed and left undisturbed has allowed the whole compartment to loosen by another degree. Your knees stay bent under the quilt in the shape they found long ago. The weight across your shins has become so familiar, it no longer reads as weight first, only as coverage, a known pressure where the fabric lies thickest. At the foot end, the radiator continues its low work. The warmth there is not dramatic. It does not spread in waves. It remains where it has been all night, strongest near the socks, and the blanket edge nearest your feet, turning the lower part of the berth into a different climate from the one by the window. The train leans into another curve. Somewhere above your hip, the canvas safety strap shifts a fraction where it hangs along the berth edge. The nickel clasp touches the frame once with a tiny note. then is still again. Not every bend brings that sound, only the sharper ones. And this one is hardly sharp at all by the standards of the line. Even so, the clasp has spoken and gone quiet, and the movement carries on beneath it. You do not count this curve. The counting custom belongs to an earlier part of the night, before the train had taken over the work so completely. Open rain, then timber again. The distinction remains, but only just. The covered stretches above Halden Spur, and the exposed lengths between them pass over the carriage like two versions of the same hand. On the glass, water keeps finding its slant lines beside your pillow. Overhead, boards gather the weather and return it changed when the train enters another shed. Underneath, the wheels continue their padded report through the grade. The mountain is known only in these translated forms. Pressure through the mattress, a broader sway on the spirals, rain altered by roof and wall, the patient speed of a train built for climbing in the dark. Below, the enamel carafe gives no sound tonight. It sits in its wire holder, where it has sat since evening, carrying its clean metal scent and the station cold memory of water filled before departure. You do not need it. It is enough to know it is there, another fitted object in its place. The brass switch above remains untouched, cool in the dark. The wool at your shoulder has the same faint roughness. The ledge beside the window catches another line of damp at the corner and keeps it there for a while. You find that your attention no longer travels very far before returning. It goes as far as the amber under the door when Mirek passes, as far as the roof when the train enters timber, as far as the shelf beside your pillow where water beads and slides. Then it folds back again to the berth itself, to the mattress giving under your ribs, to the quilt over your legs, to the warmer pocket near your feet, to the slight rise and fall of your own breath in air cooled by the glass and tempered by wood. Another covered stretch gathers over the train. The drumming on the timber is fuller this time, or perhaps your hearing has come closer to it. Rain on boards, wheels under floor, the occasional small complaint of old joinery somewhere down the car where wood meets metal, and both continue in service. The sounds do not compete. They lie one over another. The carriage sways through them with the same patient side-to-side motion, and the berth, narrow as it is, feels less like a shelf fixed to a wall than a small room suspended inside larger motion. After a minute, or several, the train comes back into open weather. The rain thins against the roof and sharpens on the window. A line of water near your pillow joins another and moves down the glass in a crooked silver path before losing itself in the darkness below the frame. The corridor stays mostly still. No more door sounds come. No voices. Only once, far away and almost imagined, the carriage giving one long wooden settling note as the grade changes and the couplings take the strain a little differently. Then even that is gone. You remain where you have been all along, with the same quilt gathered over your legs, the same cool margin of window near your brow, the same hidden warmth at your feet. The train leans and comes back. Rain hisses, then deepens overhead, then hisses again. Somewhere above your hip, the strap hangs quiet now, though the berth keeps moving beneath it. Water finds another path down the glass. The wheels go on under everything, carrying their muffled rhythm upward, while the dark outside stays dark, and the climb, without saying so, continues.